Yesterday was a great day for underdogs.
Yeah.
I am, of course, talking about college football. And I just got to tell you, I had to take notes for the underdogs. Oh my goodness, what a day. Whether you're a college football fan or not, hopefully you are a fan for underdogs, at least sometimes. And if you are, yesterday was your day. I mean, just to give you a quick rundown, Texas A&M lost to Appalachian State, unranked. That was number 6, Texas A&M. Number 8, Notre Dame lost to unranked Marshall. Number 9, Baylor lost to number 21, BYU. Number 12, Florida lost to number 20, Kentucky. Number 17, Pittsburgh lost to Tennessee. Number 24, I need to get a drink of water. Number 19, Wisconsin lost to Washington State, unranked. Number 25, Houston lost to unranked Texas Tech. Nebraska, not ranked, but 22.5 point predicted to win. I should say it the other way around. Georgia Southern was picked to be the underdog by 22.5 points, and they won. They beat Nebraska. And probably the one that most people will be talking about. Number 1, can't get rid of them. Nick Saban's Alabama almost lost to unranked Texas.
Wow.
It was an unbelievable day for the underdogs, and I was thinking about that and thinking, why do we get so excited about underdogs, for those of us who do? And most people I know have at one time or another been a fan for underdogs. Now, typically, it's not when the underdog's playing your team. But we like to pull for the underdog. And I'm just kind of thinking through that and wondering, why is that? What is it about that thrill of victory, so to speak, when the underdog wins? You could say it was a great day, a great thrill of victory moment for fans of underdog teams because they overcame yesterday. And I think there's something that resonates with our spirits. Let me poke fun at it just for a moment. You may or may not have been this person, but you've certainly seen it on commercials because we celebrate it. And that is the fans all at home watching, whether it's a few or it's a whole room full, glued to the TV, and when the team scores that they're pulling for, they all celebrate, and it's high-fiving, and it's fist-bumping and chest-bumping and whatever else. I mean, it's exciting time. And yet, if you step back for a minute, maybe you've done this, I certainly have, you got to look at all those folks and think, kind of like a comedian would say, and I'm not one, but a Michael Jr., maybe, if you know who I'm talking about. Or even to go way back, and Everybody Loves Raymond. We just kind of look at these high-fiving, chest-bumping people cheering over something they had absolutely nothing to do with, and say, really? Really? You're going to get this excited about something you had nothing to do with? Which then brings me back to the question, why is it that we love to celebrate the overcoming? And don't think I'm poking fun at you. Man, I'm that guy. When it's my team, underdog, or pick to win, I'm going crazy. If there's nobody around to watch. And then it doesn't count, that's right. We love when our team is winning. And I think there's something even more so when our team is the underdog, or we're just pulling for the underdog. So besides the fun, I want to get serious just for a moment and ask you, why do we celebrate with such energy and such emotion when we really didn't do anything at all? When we really didn't have anything to do with the success of the team? Even if we by chance happen to be a supporter and we send in some money, well, okay, you can really reach and say you had something to do with. But in the moment at the time, why do we get so excited and celebrate? I don't know what your answer may be, but I'll tell you what I think a common answer is. It's because we, as people, men and women across cultures, have another common experience we share: the agony of defeat. We've all been there. Some of you are fans of teams that have experienced that more than others. But even if you're not that type of a fan of that type of a team, even if you're not a fan of football or sports at all, you know what I'm talking about when I say you've experienced the agony of defeat. If I said it another way, if I took it out of competitive terms, and I said, you know what it's like to experience the agony of despair. You know what it's like to experience the agony of a personal defeat. You know what it's like to experience the agony of doing the very best you think you could do, or striving to do something you don't know how to do, or just facing a responsibility that is yours and you simply can't fulfill it. It's a common human experience. We get it. And even though not a single one of you is responding to me right now like you have to these other things I've been describing, I suspect it's because it's so real it causes us to become quiet and kind of turn introspective and feel deep down inside, oh, I hope this sermon's not about that. It's a feeling we don't want to have. And thankfully, it's not just about that. I'm going to talk about that, but that's not the point of this sermon. So be encouraged. This feeling of defeat, this feeling of despair, this agony we have, it's an interesting thing to consider when you're in a context you're not normally thinking of it in, cheering for that team that is winning, getting so excited. I don't think it occurs to us at that time, wow, this is great. It's making me feel so much better. It's solving my problems. I can come out from underneath the rock I've been living under. That's not going through our minds. Well, not in the front of our minds. But somewhere deep in our spirits, there's a part of us that's cheering wildly, or maybe just breathing a short little breath, hoping against all odds that this victory is somehow going to feed me what I'm hungry for. Somehow it's going to relieve me of my pain. We celebrate the triumph of the human spirit when we watch others succeed, particularly in a sports team. I think that's one of the easiest ways we as people relate. And I don't have to have a lot of numbers to back it up. I could just simply point to the amount of money we as a people spend on sports, just as spectators. Oh, we're into it because we want to share, to feel like we're sharing in that triumph of the human spirit. But there's a problem with it, isn't there? What's the problem with cheering? What's the problem with, let me say it differently, putting our hope in the triumph of the human spirit? It doesn't last, right? You got to keep winning. If I can put it back in the sports team's mind, go back and ask one of those teams that I follow, I'm a fan of, the Georgia Bulldogs, who prior to this past year had not won a national championship since 1980. Some of you weren't even thought about in 1980. That's a long time. And do you think, I don't know if you know any fans of them, but pick another team that's been the same way. Ask those folks, are they still celebrating today because they overcame and won a championship eons ago? Well, maybe, but it's just not the same. There's a longing, there's a yearning, there's a maybe this year. It's in every sport. It's in every spirit. Every human spirit. We want to succeed. And even though we may have done that in wonderful fashion in the past, it only carries us so long. You got to keep winning to keep feeding the Spirit. Eventually, as life goes on, you and I know what happens. We begin to stop having the success we once had. Because things start to break down. Our bodies start to break down. Our enthusiasm begins to wane. Our energy begins to be sapped. We just don't have what we once did. And no matter how much we want to, we just can't seem to pull off the triumph that we so long to experience. And that's when many of those star athletes join our ranks as fans and celebrating the victory of somebody else. So what does all that have to do with us on a Sunday morning, sitting in the middle of a church service? I think it has a lot to do with us. In fact, the scriptures speak of it over and over and over. If you have read the Psalms, you know it. And I don't even have to point you to a particular psalm, because if you've read any of the Psalms, just about, you're going to know it either because it's celebrating a triumph that the writer experienced, or it's grieving the absence of that triumph. It's longing for that absence, or longing for that victory, that triumph. It's all throughout the Psalms. Because even the greatest of individual, or the greatest nation, eventually fails, eventually falls. Now I want you to look at a couple of Psalms this morning, because in the midst of this feeling of agony, this feeling of defeat, this feeling of despair, one of the common experiences we also have is loneliness, aloneness, isolation. And I don't really want to talk to anybody about it, and that just furthers the isolation. And I find myself sitting here by myself in misery, hoping nobody else will know, but I can't get over it. If you flip to Psalm 42, you find in 42 and 43, kind of continuing right on through. Some say it should have been just one psalm, or maybe was originally, and somewhere along the line got divided up. There's a particular phrase in this, Psalm 42 and 43. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Now set that aside just for a moment and see if you can relate, see if you can think of a time when you were in that kind of state. Longing for a breakthrough, longing for a victory, longing for an overcoming of whatever it is that's just tearing you apart, challenging you that you can't get over. And then think of asking that question to yourself in different language, maybe your own words. Why? I'll put it in my terms. Why, Reed? Why are you so downcast? Why am I so disturbed deep within me? It's repeated. In chapter 42, it's repeated, it's stated in verse 5. It's repeated down in verse 11. And then at the end of 43, it's repeated again. This whole psalm is shaped by that feeling of despair, that deep struggle. But the wondering, why? Why am I here? Why do I feel this way? And you can most imagine that occurring to someone who has either been used to success, who's been used to being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, if you will. Someone who's been used to being able to work harder or think smarter or any number of other ways of achieving victory on their own. And now they've run up against something they simply can't overcome. And they are burdened. Now it has an even greater meaning to those of us who are Christian, those of us who believe in God, perhaps those of us who believe in a different God, have some hope of someone outside themselves that they put their hope in. Of thinking, well, why am I so down? Don't I believe that this God of mine can help? I say I do when I'm in a good mood. Why is it that when I'm down or in difficulty or in defeat or despair, that all of a sudden this God can't help me anymore? Why do I feel that way? And as the Psalm 42 begins, again in language we are not likely to use, as the deer pants, in other words, as an animal pants for streams of water, my soul pants for you. Another way of saying that is, as a very, very, very thirsty person. Man, if I could just have a cup of cool water, if I could just have a cold drink that would soothe my thirst. That's how much I long for my God to be with me, to come and help me. That's what the psalmist is writing here. It's truly a state of agony. And the Scripture, the Bible witnesses to it. I'm guessing your experience witnesses to it. Mine certainly does. I know I've been there, and in those moments, there's nothing that makes it worse than to feel like I'm on my own. I had nobody to turn to. I had no help from anywhere else. And again, for those of us who are Christian, or for those of us who maybe just know of Jesus and think highly of Him, even though we may not be following Him or considering ourselves a part of Him, it's well attested to what Jesus went through, the agony that He experienced, the defeat that He felt, the separation that He felt. The psalmist wrote about it in Psalm 22. Psalm 22:1. And again, you may recognize this from hearing it in the New Testament. He writes, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Have you been there? Oh. I can't do a thing about it, and even the one who I think has the power to do something about it just apparently isn't paying attention. They're not answering. And that aloneness. Man, if despair wasn't there before, now it's really sinking in. Matthew and Mark write about it in the New Testament because those are in fact the words that Jesus cried out when He was hanging on the cross. And the reason He was crying it out was because in addition to the unbelievable physical pain He went through, which everybody else did who was crucified, Jesus went through a pain, a sense of agony, a real defeat no one else has gone through. Because in addition to having His physical body and His mind suffering greatly from the hands of those who had done it, He also was bearing the burden of our failings, of our sin. All that weight was on Him. And the way the weight most hit Him was He was separated from God. In the same way that you and I are separated from God because of sin. And there's not a thing we can do about it. That's my definition of despair. It takes that much more lighthearted, although maybe serious at the time, defeat when it's your team and they can't seem to pull off a victory for love or money. They can't seem to come up with the right players. They don't have the right coach. They can't get the breaks. Whatever it is against them. And you watch over and over and over the loss. Made worse when all those writers and broadcasters are talking about, hey, this is the year. Man, this is the year we're going to overcome. This is it. This is the year. And maybe those who bet are putting a lot of money on it. And so that really jacks up the belief that they're going to come through. And maybe those who do the rankings, right before the season starts, wow, this is going to be their year. They're it. Here it comes. Oh, those words ring in your ears, don't they? As you're watching your team, that team, head right down the familiar trail of losing once again. So whether you look at it from a more lighthearted way, or you look at it from the really heavy way of when we experience it, we as people so long for victory of the human spirit, our spirit, my spirit, your spirit, because we want anything and everything possible to separate us from the agony of defeat and despair. Friends, it's at that moment that the possibility, the greatest possibility known to humanity is real. When we cry out for one who can actually redeem us, one who can actually save us out of it, one who can actually rescue us, one who actually can bring us out of the despair. I'm speaking of God, the God and Father of Jesus Christ. I'm speaking specifically of Jesus Christ this morning because He is the one who can do that. And how do I know that? Well, the Bible tells me that, just like it can tell you that. And it tells me that because just as I said, no human ever has experienced the agony of defeat, the deep, dark, alone despair that Jesus did. God raised Him from the dead. God rescued Him. And He rescued Him because the relationship mattered most. Jesus never turned His back on God, and God didn't turn His back on Jesus. Jesus did what He was sent to do, and God reached out. It's not just Jesus, folks. And you may be sitting there as I have thought this past week. Lord, I know You're here. I know You're with me. I know You're here and You're with me because I've been taught that. And I've experienced that before. Why am I feeling so despairing? Why is the anguish so heavy in me? Not, by the way, over losing the ball game. Why is it that I can't overcome what I was struggling with this past week? Why is it that you have been in that place when you couldn't overcome it? If God is there. It's the question all of us have asked, all of us struggle with. I want to invite you to turn to one more psalm, Psalm 63. There's a number of places we could go, but I want you to look at Psalm 63 because there's a line in this. There's the expression of truth in this that is very much involved in what we're talking about. This is written in a time of desperation. David, King David, follower of God, was in the desert. An awful place to be. And yet he was able to say, in the midst of, and I'm reading, in a dry and parched land where there is no water, I have seen you in the sanctuary. He's saying this to God. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you, or my lips will praise you greatly. That's the line I want you to catch. Because your love is better than life. Now I truly get that sounds good, and that, we can say that to somebody. Maybe we have said that in a time when you're trying to comfort somebody. Hey, the love of the Lord is greater than this. Just hang on to that. But I don't want to ask you about when you're comforting somebody else. I want to ask you about yourself when you're in that place of deep, deep despair and you feel all alone. Because I found myself there this week. Oddly as that sounds. I know. I look at me just like you're probably looking at me and thinking, could you really have been there this week? Yeah, I was. And I could not get out of it. I couldn't get out of it. And I found myself saying, after all the things about, Lord, this is ridiculous. I've been following you for years. Lord, this is crazy. I'm a pastor. Lord, this is nuts. I'm supposed to be teaching about you. What am I doing here? And I found myself saying, after those thoughts, long after those thoughts, of still not being able to get out from under it, Lord, I am desperate for you. I am desperate for you. Because there is no one and nothing that can rescue me out of this but you. But you can. You have the power to do that. And I'm choosing to believe that your word is true when your word tells me that you love me. That you love me enough for your son to die for me. God, if that's true, if that love is true, please connect with me. I've been there before, so I no longer ask, get me out of this mess. Not that I don't want it, but I know that it's not getting out of the mess that's the deepest need. It's the connection with him. It's the reminder that he still is here and he loves me. And when I read that line, because your love is better than life. Yeah, but what about that love? Jesus had something to say about that love in a context we don't often talk about it. I want to invite you to turn to the Gospel of Matthew. Very familiar passage. Matthew 28, where Jesus is giving his commission. It's the last set of instructions he gave those he loved the most. It's the last set of instructions he gave. And we often talk about it as the Great Commission, the things that they were sent out to do, the work that they had to do. But I want you to catch what he said at the very end of it. Knowing that no great accomplishment, no great challenge, no great responsibility, no great goal is ever achieved without a lot of struggle and suffering. And he knew what he was asking them to do. At the end of verse 20, he says, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." When we talk about love not as a feeling, but as an action of the will, a decision that is best for you, that is for your benefit, that's what Jesus is talking about. I will be with you always. You will, in fact, never be alone. Friends, I want to encourage you this morning to take that to heart. And if you're at a place like that this morning, or if you've been at that place recently, or you feel like you're kind of tottering on that, man, I'm kind of at the edge here. I'm not far from that. My life seems to just be in the dumps and I can't get out of it. I can't get over it. I can't get past it. I can't get rid of whatever keeps holding on. Cry out to him, and cry out to him the very words that his word tells us. Your love is greater than life to me. The relationship we have, your love for me, is greater than anything else. And you have promised to be with me always. And then I encourage you to say this to the Lord. Lord, let me know you're with me. Let me know that you're with me. This, friends, is the good news. This is the good news for every human being, everywhere, in every situation, every challenge, every struggle that you may ever face and not be able to overcome. This is the good news. That because of what Jesus did, he now does what he does. And through the Holy Spirit, he is with us. Now, there's one additional challenge for us. Because sometimes, even if you do what I just said, you may not be able to hear him. He may be speaking to you that he's with you and you can't hear it. That's where we come in. That's where your church community comes in. The body, the people in the church, the people part of your small group. Your Christian brothers and sisters, your Christian friends. If we are doing what Jesus expects us to do, we're paying attention enough to those close to us. And they're willing to let us in. For us to step in that moment and say, you may not be able to hear him, but he's in me as well, and I want to tell you from him. He loves you, and he's here with you. And I'm here with you, which means he's here with you. There is nothing. There is no agony. There is no defeat. There is nothing we underdogs of life can't overcome without him. Meaning when he's with us, we can overcome anything. So it's good news for you and me to know for ourselves, and it's a great challenge for us to remember to stay close so that we might be the answer to somebody else's prayer. Somebody else's cry in their heart. This is the good news, folks. This is the thrill of victory. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I mean that from my heart as of this week. There is good news for everyone. and his name is Jesus. To God be all the glory. Well, friends,